If you caught a good Raikou during this event, it is actually really good to invest in one. But you need to understand how it works and when it's actually going to be useful. Jolteon, on the other hand, is completely power creeped by Raikou. Welcome back to another Pokemon Sleep video. It's Bro Vinny here. Now, even though we're focusing on Raikou today, this also happens to be a continuation of my advanced Eevee guide. This is going to be part 5 of the evolutions because we're also going to talk about Jolteon. And to not bore those of you who don't like to look at all these different numbers that are behind me, let me give you the conclusions first. Raikou hasn't outranked the perfect berry specialist. If you've got a really good Typhlosion, Feraligatr, Meganium, they are still really pretty much top tier. It hasn't outranked a perfectly used Ampharos, and by that I mean Ampharos as a skill specialist requires that you collect the productions quite often in order to maximize the output. Otherwise, the skills, they don't bank bank like berries do, where they keep in the inventory. It's not like you can trigger 2 or 3 skills at once. So Ampharos, as long as you collect every production as a charge strength M specialist, is still quite top tier. Having said that, there are many situations where Raikou can really shine. One of them being overstacking berries. If you remember what we talked about on extra helpful S Pokemon like Gallade and Jolteon, their skill, even though under normal circumstances, are not actually that good because they don't produce enough to beat, let's say, a top tier berry specialist. You could use them to stack your berries above the Pokemon's carry limit into the next week, into the Monday, into a new area. Especially if the next week is an event week where you want to be able to power up that Snorlax Drowsy power as much as possible. So extra helpful S was the way to do it before Raikou came along. But Raikou completely blows extra helpful S out the window with its arrival because its skill is just that much more powerful even though it has a low trigger rate. And we will go into the numbers in a moment, they're behind me. Now, one common misconception about Raikou is that it's not good because it's got a low trigger rate. That's actually not true. The reason it has a low trigger rate is because the skill is just too powerful. It wouldn't make sense to give it the same trigger rate as Jolteon, and I actually see it as a good thing. Now, just having a quick look at the numbers, we're not going to go too deep into this at this part of the video. Raikou has about half the triggers as a Jolteon. Now, of course, these numbers depends on how you play the game and how you set up the calculator, but Raikou approximately triggers half the time that Jolteon triggers. Now, that can't be a good thing, right? It's actually not that bad. If you think about it, I'd rather have a strong skill that doesn't trigger often than a weak skill that triggers a lot. And that's because, practically speaking, if you only log in, let's say 4 times a day, then let's say you can get 4 triggers at most in a day, you'd rather those triggers to be strong. Whereas if you can only log in 4 times a day, but the Pokemon could theoretically trigger 10, 15 times, you're still only getting 4 triggers a day. So practically speaking, a strong skill with a low trigger rate is better than a weak skill with a high trigger rate. Of course, it all depends on how the numbers work out in the end, and I can tell you that Raikou is better. You should also understand that Raikou's skill is a relative skill. The stronger the rest of its team, the better the skill is going to be. So while I've said that Ampharos is top tier, as long as you collect every production, you're logging into the game very often, right? Ampharos' skill, Charge Strength M, is not relative to the rest of the team. So let's say in the future, a new Pokemon gets released and it's much stronger. It's like better than Typhlosion as a berry specialist. Well, Raikou's skill will scale better than Ampharos because Ampharos wouldn't change at all. Whereas Raikou's skill will actually improve over time. Unless, of course, the level cap on the skill goes up for Ampharos once again. Then things might change. And of course, you should know that Raikou, just like any skill specialist, they need to have a high skill level. You need to give Ampharos the main skill seeds, or at least have skill level up M or S in its sub-skill list for it to be good, for it to be very much powerful and reach its max potential. At low main skill level, Raikou's not going to shine, but that's true for almost any skill specialist. Thankfully, You don't need an entire team of electric species in order for Raikou to be good. But there is a way to use Raikou with an entire team of different electric species for that skill to be good. So let's talk about the mechanics of Helper Boost Electric. So how does Helper Boost Electric actually work? Now, I'm going to briefly cover this because I've actually already covered this before. But the way that it actually works is, let's go to Raikou's stats. At base, if you only have Raikou on the field, then at level 6 main skill, it will produce 5 extra productions per Pokemon on your team. At lower levels, it will produce less. These are the numbers. And what each production means is if that Pokemon that gets the extra production normally produces 3 berries, let's say it's a Raichu with 3 Grappa berries, then it will produce 5 times 3, so that's 15 berries on that Raichu. Of course, there's a chance that it could be ingredients, and it will apply that to every single team member. But if there's a Raichu on the team, then the skill gets better. So the way that this chart works on the Raidonix calculator, and I'm going to leave a link to this calculator in the description below, is that if you have 5 different electric species on your team, so different species meaning Pikachu and Raichu count as different species, Hat Pikachu counts as different species. If you've got 5 different electric species, including Raikou, and level 6 main skill, then you will have a total of 11 extra productions per team member. So if you think about 5 team members, that's 55 extra productions. Theoretically, if everyone produced 2 berries, then you get 110 berries for your entire team. So let's take one example just so you guys can see how it works. If, for example, I've got this team here, I've got Blastoise and 4 different electric species because Raichu and Pikachu count as different. I've got Jolteon and I've got Raikou. Then let's say I've got level 6 main skill on the Raikou. I would look at this chart here and go to the bottom. It is 9. The +4 just means how many extra compared to if you had 0 species on the team. So ignore that bracket number. It is 9 extra help applied to every single team member. Now what you can do at this point, let's say you know that Raikou will trigger. And you can do that by using the trick where you turn off the Wi-Fi and your internet connection. And we've talked about that in another video. If you know that Raikou will trigger, you can actually change out this entire team. So I can actually change out this Raichu for, let's say, a Walrein, like this, and the productions will go to the Walrein. Because my Walbonus has Berry Finding S, it's going to give me 3 berries every production. I get 9 productions, so 9 times 3, that's 27 berries for Walrein. And of course, that will apply also to every single team member. But what's interesting here is that even though I've switched to Walrein, it will still use the extra help count from before I switched the team. And that's because the amount that the skill triggers, the amount of extra help that the skill triggers is determined on the server side the moment that it's already triggered in Raikou. You just haven't collected it yet. So therefore, it doesn't work in reverse. If I had, say, 4 Walrein on this team, and then I swap in an electric team, it would only count the amount, the extra help from the 1 species. Because only Raikou was on the team when the skill became available to trigger. At this point, I think it's also worth mentioning that Raikou's skill is independent of your helpers, your other helpers' speed, because it's how many extra helps. So that means if you had a slow Pokemon that produces very powerful berries, let's say Altaria producing dragon berries, which are powerful. Altaria would normally take a long time to produce those berries because it's just slow. Raikou will immediately give you something like 11 times 3, which is 33 dragon berries from Altaria. So Raikou is useful in helping Pokemon that otherwise would produce things in a slow rate. Another example would be Slowking. So you could utilize Raikou in a way to farm Slowpoke tails, or just to produce things that you normally take a long time to produce. And therefore you can have a full electric team, let's say 5 different species, so that it produces 11 productions, extra productions, when you trigger the Raikou. But before you trigger the Raikou, you swap out your entire team for, let's say, 4 Slowkings, and just have the Raikou proc its main skill and hopefully collect a bunch of Slowpoke tails and then swap out the team again. But of course, you don't have to run an entire electric species team. You could have half. You will still get a respectable extra productions times 5 team members. So that's still a good amount. And when I say a good amount, I mean actually a lot, because if we compare it to what we had before, which was just extra helpful S Pokemon, and these were their production numbers, only a maximum of 10, and it's on one random Pokemon on your team, even if the trigger rate were twice the amount of Raikou, you're not going to get Raikou's amount of numbers. Let's do some quick maths here. So what we're going to compare is, let's say you've got both Pokemon Jolteon and Raikou at level 6 main skill. So here, Raikou will trigger 5 extra helps per Pokemon. That's 25 extra helps in total. Jolteon will produce 10 extra helps, but only on one Pokemon. So if we have a look at the numbers, Jolteon with 10 extra helps on one Pokemon a day, triggering at about twice as much as Raikou. This is an approximate. You get about 20 extra helps per day in total. Raikou, on the other hand, 5 extra helps if there's no other electric species. It's just by itself. It works on 5 Pokemon, so you get 25 extra helps at about 1 times the rate compared to Jolteon. You get 25 extra helps. So even without any electric species, Raikou is already better than Jolteon. But there is a better extra helpful S Pokemon, a Gallade. So let's put in Gallade here. And we're going to use these trigger rate here because it's going to be a little bit more realistic. We've got Raikou at 3.4, Jolteon at 6.5, and Gallade at 8.26 under similar conditions with helping bonus, skill trigger M, also have helping speed up. I've also gone under advanced options in the Raikou calculator and put in 4 helping bonus Pokemon on the team. So that means that the helping bonus will apply approximately 25% speed boost instead of just 5% to get these numbers. And of course, you have to check your settings to make sure you've got the correct healing on. So going back to Jolteon, I've got 10 extra helps, but 6.5 times a day in terms of trigger. And that's assuming you can collect all 6.5 triggers every day. That's a total of 65 extra helps. Raikou will get 85 extra helps and Gallade will get 83 extra helps. So these are really close. Of course, Gallade is at its max potential, whereas Raikou, you start introducing electric species, will get much better than this number. So even at Raikou's worst, it still matches, if not slightly better than Gallade. And don't forget that, how often are you going to collect 8 triggers in Gallade in a day? That's not as realistic as trying to get 3.5 triggers from Raikou in a day. Raikou is even better from a practical point of view. So what if we have Raikou being at its theoretical best with 11 triggers? So let's say you've got a full electric team and then you swap out the 4 Pokemon for the best team members that you've got, knowing that Raikou will trigger. How many extra helps is that? At 3.4 triggers a day is 187 extra helps per day. Don't forget that each extra help might produce 3 berries if you've got berry finding S Pokemon on the field. And now you can see that Raikou is not only more convenient to use, it's easier to use. You don't have to collect as often to trigger the amount of triggers that's indicated by the calculator. It also produces a lot more in total compared to Jolteon and Gallade. But we've always known that Jolteon and Gallade are actually not good skills to use. The extra helpful S is just not that powerful. The only reason why we do use them is to overstack the berries. So the question now is, does Raikou's amount of extra helps actually beats another really good Pokemon? Let's say a berry finding S berry specialist. Now I caution people to use the production comparison when analyzing Raikou, because in the Raikou calculator, the extra helps strength only accounts for 1/5 of its actual power, because there's no other team member in production comparison to apply those extra helps to. So it's gonna look like Raikou really sucks if you look at production comparison. You will have to use team analysis, because team analysis will count Raikou's main skill on the other Pokemon, and I'll show you how that's done. From this point of the video onward, we're going to go in depth on how good Raikou is. We're going to look at numbers. In fact, a lot of numbers.
A story. Keep it simple. No math.
But it's all math.
Just know that at this point, I've already covered some of the most major points about Raikou. It is good to use. It's good to overstack berries with. In fact, a lot better than Jolteon and Gallade if that's how you plan to use it. So even if you don't have a perfect Raikou, you can invest in one in preparation for another event in the future. But if you don't actually have a good Raikou, you don't want to invest in one, that's okay. Berry specialists, having a strong team otherwise is still going to be just as viable. You're not missing out by not having a good Raikou if we're just talking about powering up Snorlax within the same week. So to know whether Raikou is actually better than the current meta or not, we need to look at the current meta. So let's say we have a full team of nearly perfect Raikous. So we're talking about having stats like Berry Finding S, we've got Helping Speed Up, we've got Helping Bonus, and this is the same for the entire team. And then we've given each and every single Raichu 4 main seeds, so that they're at level 7 main skill. And then we made them all level 50 and also give them Adamant Nature, which is the preferred nature for a Berry Specialist. And we've got 5 of them on the team. Then we get about a weekly production of 1.17 million in Snorlax strength. Of course, what we also do know is that we really need a healer on the team. Otherwise, half of your day, your Pokemon will be farming at a very slow rate. We're talking about losing the 2.2 times multiplier. So in fact, I've set up another team here with a perfect healer. So a Raichu team, same stats, but with Gardevoir, and we can see the numbers actually go up. And this is another important point, is that healers are absolutely essential in this game. A good or perfect healer will power up your entire team. A few months ago, before a change in the mechanics of how sleep tracking worked, healers were comparable to having a 5th Berry Specialist. I don't know if you guys remember this, but I did a comparison where we had 5 Raichus and then had Wigglytuff in the team. And I showed that Wigglytuff was about the same as having a 5th Raichu. But because of the change in how sleep tracking works now, the Pokemon actually depletes energy during sleep as opposed to keeping 100% energy during sleep. Having a healer to maintain that energy throughout the day and even keep the energy high before you go to sleep, your team will produce overall much more productions than if you didn't have a healer. So subbing out a Raichu for a healer is actually a very good idea. Of course, what you might know also is that Raichu is not at the top of the berry game. We could look at Typhlosion as well. So let's take a look at Typhlosion with Gardevoir. So we're looking at about 1.6 million strength. All these numbers are without favorite berry typing. One more example is Ampharos, a full Ampharos team. Remember, I said Ampharos is only, just like any other skill specialist, it's only good if you actually manage to collect all the skills. And for this Ampharos to be good, and I've given it some pretty good stats, you need to be able to make sure you get about 5 triggers a day, which may not happen unless you're collecting every single production. And assuming that you have enough main seeds, and this is, again, theoretical. This is only for comparison purposes. Of course, nobody will ever have 4 main seeds for 5 Ampharos, 5 perfect Ampharos to invest in. This is purely for comparison's sake to see how good each team build or each Pokemon is. But let's say you do have 5 Ampharos, then you get very similar results to 4 Typhlosion with a healer. But of course, remember, I just said that healer is very important. So let's try and add a healer to the Ampharos team, and suddenly we get the highest number we've seen so far, 1.78 million strength. So this is the top meta of the game, but there's a lot of conditions for this to be the best. You need to collect every production once again. You need to have enough main skill seeds in order to invest that many Ampharos. This is not to say you need that many Ampharos. This is to say that Ampharos is really good. You might just want 1 on your team. You might not want 5 on your team. And now, if we look at these top teams with their favorite berry typing on. So let's say, hypothetically, Greppa and Psychic Berries are favorite. We're looking at about 2.3 million in total strength in a week. If we now change to the Typhlosion team and give it Fire type berry, favorite berry, and also Psychic, we get 2.6 million total strength. And the reason why Typhlosion now overtakes the Ampharos team makes sense is because there's more berries that are getting double the strength. Whereas Ampharos is a skill specialist, so its skill doesn't get better because of any changes in the favorite berry typing. So any favorite berry Pokemon will relatively get a lot more strength if it's also favorite berry. And if we also take a look at Feraligatr, very similar to Typhlosion, about 2.6 million in the weekly total Snorlax strength if we hypothetically had a Psychic and Water Berry favorite berry island. Now let's take a look at Raikou and see what kind of numbers we can produce. So this is our team. Raikou, top tier, berry specialist, I gave it berry finding S. You can see with the little berry finding S symbol there. Ampharos, I gave it the skill specialist, ideal stats. And then I also put in the Witch Hat Pikachu. You could choose something else. Witch Hat Pikachu is slightly faster than No Hat Pikachu, and they both count as an extra species. And then I also put in a healer. I've tried it without a healer, it doesn't work as well. So a full team of electric species is a bit worse than 4 electric species with 1 healer in terms of the total strength. We get about 1.5 million. Now remember, this is without favorite berries. So of course, if we now put on favorite berries for everyone, we're looking about 2.4 million, which is still quite a respectable amount. Now at this point, I should probably mention how you can actually see the Helper Boost electric main skill in effect. If you click and open up the details of each Pokemon, under normal circumstances, where you see skill strength is here. This number here. So just to break it down, this is the energy, average energy throughout the day. This is how long it takes for the inventory to reach maximum. This number is the total number of berries produced a day. This number is therefore the strength from the berries. These are how many ingredients are produced in a day and the strength from the ingredients. And then these numbers just talk about the extra tasty chance. All right, now onto the part that we want to focus on today. This number is how many skill triggers your Pokemon is expected to have in a day. So for Raichu here, is expected to have about 3.7 triggers, and that means that because it's a charge strength S specialist, that means at level 7 main skill, this is the total strength you would get in a day from that Raichu. The reason why there's no strength number here for Raikou is because its strength is in the berry and ingredient production of your team, which is measured here. So from the 3.6 triggers in a day, Raikou itself is expected to have about 26 grappa berries produced in that day, but it also gives 79 or 80 grappa berries on Raichu. Now it makes a lot more sense because Raichu produces a lot more berries than Raikou. In fact, 3 times more berries, so that's approximately right. Of course, some of it will go into ingredients because there's a chance that ingredients would drop instead of berries. And this is the strength that you would get from the berries alone, and this is the strength you get from the ingredients alone, and so on and so forth. So the actual total strength you get from the Helper Boost Electric is the sum of these numbers, these strength numbers, not the sleepy signs, ignore those. These strength numbers. And you can actually prove this for yourself because I've set the Raikou at level 6 main skill. There are 4 electric species on my team. So if we look at 4 electric species at level 6 main skill, that's 9 extra helps. If we now go back to the team, 9 extra helps times 3.6 triggers is 32 extra helps in a day. 32 extra helps on 1 berry on the Raikou should give you 32 berries. But remember, about a fifth of it or a quarter of it goes into ingredients instead. That's why it's a little bit less than 32. And you just multiply the grappa strength with this number to get this number here. And you can verify it the same thing for Raichu, because Raichu, this one has berry finding S. So for 32 extra helps, if we multiply that by 3, is about 97 berries. Of course, it's a bit less because some of it will go into ingredients instead. So that's how you measure Helper Boost as a strength. You're going to have to add these numbers yourself to see what kind of strength Helper Boost in itself is providing your team. Now, what if you don't want to run these 4 Pokemon? What if you think Halloween Pikachu is just not as strong? I mean, look at the total strength output. It's a bit less than Raikou. What if you prefer 2 Raichus, or even better, a stronger berry specialist that produces a more powerful berry, but has a lower speed, which actually makes Helper Boost stronger? Remember, a slow Pokemon that produces a powerful item benefits more from Helper Boost. So I've actually set up for another example here where we swap out the Witch Hat Pikachu, so this one here, for Typhlosion, which produces a stronger berry typing. Then the total strength goes from 1.47 million with the Pikachu to about 1.54 million. Now you might go, actually that's not a huge jump. I expected, given that it's a stronger berry, that it should be a bigger jump. But the problem is, you also nerfed its skill a little bit because there's less electric species on the team. But overall, there is still an improvement on the strength, so you don't need an entire team of electric species in order to make Raikou good. And this is mainly because Typhlosion is top tier, so obviously having it in place of the weaker Pikachu was always going to improve your team. It's just a question of whether nerfing Raikou's skill by swapping out 1 electric species was going to harm it a lot, and it turns out it didn't. Let's take one more example. Let's remove the Raichu and put Typhlosion in. Not a huge difference. In fact, if you've got strong berry specialists on your team, it's not going to make a huge difference just because you don't have electric species on your team. Let's take out another electric species and put Typhlosion on. Now it starts to go down a little bit, and that's because, well, once again, Ampharos is calculated as the top tier Pokemon with the highest strength only because it assumes that you collect every single production. I did do a Jolteon example as well, but you can see that overall everything just kind of goes down, so Jolteon is not that great. Jolteon and Gallade and other extra helpful S Pokemon will remain something that is just niche for either overstacking berries, or if you don't have a good Raichu and don't have a good Ampharos, then you might use a Jolteon in order to improve the skill on Raikou. But otherwise, with Raikou's introduction, it's better to just run a Raikou than trying to use Jolteon even for overstacking purposes. And here are the settings that I use. I don't have any sort of cooking dishes available, so that's why my cooking numbers are quite low, so that I can really focus on the berry and the skill amounts. And in my settings, I don't have any area bonus, and I don't have the event bonus on, so all of what I'm talking about is disregarding any event bonuses. If event bonus were on, Jolteon actually is quite good, in fact better than Gallade. And one thing to note is that the skill trigger for skill recovery doesn't apply to team analysis. It does apply to production comparison, but what I put in here doesn't really matter. The sleep hours, well, 8.5 hours. And you can also put in when you cook your meals in the day so that the app knows when to recover the energy on your Pokemon. This is just if you wanted to reproduce numbers like mine. Of course, you can put in your own numbers to see what kind of results you're expected to get. If you have any questions about this, let me know in the comments section below. It is very complex to think about. I would just say that everyone should have a Raikou, good or not, paying or not paying, because you want to be able to overstack your berries at some point in the future to prepare for the next event. It is still really good, although not the best at producing strength within the same week. For your current week's Snorlax, definitely better than Gallade and Jolteon, and requires less effort for you to make its skill good. Hopefully you did get a good one during the event, because it just seems like it's very, very rare to spawn, and Raikou only spawns at Greengrass Isle, which kind of sucks because not many people want to go to Greengrass Isle, because Greengrass Isle, the area bonus tends to be quite high since a lot of events actually happen there. And don't forget that you can now support the channel by joining and becoming a member. That allows you to see some videos earlier, allows you to use emojis in the comments section below. So have a look and see what the perks are by clicking that join button. Thank you for watching, guys. If you have any questions, make sure to leave it in the comments section below, and I'll try to answer each and every one of your queries.